The Galactic Council had established the quarantine 300 years ago. Earth was to remain sealed, untouched, isolated from the rest of civilization. The ancient records were explicit: this species poses an existential threat to all known sentient life. Observation only. No contact. Ever. But that was before Ambassador Zorn arrived. Zorn was a Thelian diplomat, ancient and wise by the standards of the galaxy. He had grown weary of the superstitious fear surrounding Earth. The quarantine, he argued, was based on outdated information. Humanity had evolved. They had moved beyond their violent nature. It was time to open the doors and welcome Earth into the galactic community. The Council debated for months. In the end, sentiment shifted. The vote passed. The quarantine was lifted. Within 50 years, humanity had conquered half the galaxy. Dr. Maya Reeves stood in the observation chamber of the research station orbiting Jupiter, watching a fleet of human warships maneuver with terrifying precision. She had been studying Earth's rise ever since first contact. Now, at 73 years old, she finally understood what the ancients had known. Humans weren't conquerors by accident. They were conquerors by design, by nature, by instinct, by something fundamental in their cellular makeup. "They've taken another 5 systems," her assistant, a young Kepler, reported nervously. "The Vorthan coalition has surrendered without firing a shot." Maya nodded grimly. She had tried to warn the Council. But her warnings had been dismissed as alarmist, xenophobic even. Zorn had been remarkably persuasive in his arguments for humanity's peaceful intentions. Zorn was now dead, killed by a human diplomat who had objected to trade negotiations. The humans called it an unfortunate accident. Everyone knew it was murder. The pattern was always the same. Humans would arrive in a system with smiles and open hands. They would establish trade agreements, form alliances, create dependencies. Then, when resistance was minimal and defenses were lowered, they would simply take what they wanted. The transition was seamless, efficient, inevitable. What made them truly terrifying wasn't their military capability; many species possessed superior weapons. It was their adaptability. Humans learned from every encounter, every setback. They studied their enemies, exploited weaknesses, and refined their strategies with ruthless precision. They were patient in ways that defied comprehension. They could plan for decades, sacrificing short-term gains for long-term dominance. And they understood something that most civilizations had forgotten: the power of narrative. They told compelling stories about why their expansion was justified, necessary, beneficial. They made conquest sound like gift-giving. Entire species integrated willingly into the human sphere before realizing they had been absorbed. Maya pulled up the ancient records again. The warnings of the archive keepers, the ones who had first identified Earth as a threat. They had observed early humanity for thousands of years before issuing the quarantine order. A species that evolved through competition, the records stated. That values individual and collective survival above all else. That possesses unparalleled creativity in warfare. That can rationalize any action as morally justified. That views the universe as a resource to be exploited. This species, if unleashed, will not rest until it has dominated all others. The archive keepers had been scientists, not alarmists. And they had been absolutely correct. In the past 50 years, humanity had established hegemony over 40% of the galaxy. They had done it with minimal violence compared to their capability; they simply didn't need to destroy much. Surrender came easily when the alternative was hopelessness. The worst part, Maya realized, was that the other species couldn't unite against them. Humans had sown discord among potential allies, exploited old grievances, and positioned themselves as the only stable power. They had become indispensable to the galactic economy before anyone noticed they were consolidating control. Maya composed a message to the Council, knowing it would fall on deaf ears. The council that had lifted the quarantine. The council that had been convinced of humanity's benevolence. The council that now served at the pleasure of human interests. She watched the human fleet execute another perfect maneuver through space, and she understood what the ancients had learned long ago: some cages exist for good reasons. And the worst mistake any civilization can make is opening the door. Humanity wasn't conquering the galaxy. Humanity was simply being itself. And that was exactly what everyone had feared.